Hello, my name is Noah Arceneaux. I'm actually a professor of media studies at San Diego State University. I'm not a professor of music. I'm not a music historian, but I am a big music fan, and I collect records, specifically 45s. I'm making this video for the people in the Facebook group, 45 Collectors, the Little Black Circle. I know there's some other people in the group who like music from Louisiana, Cajun music, Zydeco music, swamp pop, that sort of thing. Anyway, I'm here in Louisiana. It's May 26, 2023. I'm here in Louisiana doing research on radio stations that still broadcast in French or that really promote Cajun culture. Anyway, as part of this, I was in Ville Platte, Louisiana this morning, and I did an interview with Floyd, legendary music producer from Ville Platte, responsible for Soileau, that label, Gin, that label, and probably some other labels as well. I'm sure he's done a lot of stuff. Anyway, I had actually interviewed the guy before. I knew that he was very, very talkative. He's 85 years old, super sharp. His mind is still quite sharp, very, very talkative. Anyway, so I came up with this idea where we sat down in his office. I had a bunch of images on my computer, actually some images I'd posted online of my record collection, just the Soileau and Gin stuff, and then also Maison de Soul. I guess that's like a label he did for Zydeco music. Anyway, the plan was just to kind of like page through, kind of go through images of the 45, and then he could talk about each 45, what he remembered. So I'm posting the entire video here. Maybe I'll figure out how to do chapter breaks in YouTube, but I'm going to post the entire video here. He talks about quite a few records, quite a few 45s. I think some people in the group, specifically if you are into Louisiana music, Soileau or Gin, or that sort of thing, I think you'll find this of value. And I just let the guy talk. I didn't really ask him too many questions. I just tried to like corral him a little bit, but basically it's him talking. It's audio, and I put still images over the audio so that you have something to look at, but I didn't videotape the whole thing. I just basically recorded his audio, and then I'm putting still images over it. Anyway, hopefully that long rambling introduction makes sense. I'm making this for people like me who collect 45 records, specifically stuff from Louisiana, Southern Louisiana, Cajun, Zydeco, swamp pop, and hopefully someone gets something out of this. You produced all this stuff.
Some of that stuff I'll have memories from, I won't.
Yeah, so I got a box of Louisiana records. I just call it my Louisiana records to separate it. And I decided to separate them by label. Gold Band has a label.
Yeah.
There's Crazy Cajun. You know all this stuff.
Yeah, that's all from these.
What's the one from up like Shreveport? Like
that was Stan's
Jewel or something?
Jewel. That was Stan Lewis's record company.
Okay, but I mean, I took photos of the Soileau.
Yeah. Now see that bird right there? Mm-hmm. That was the logo later that we had. The first logo was this one, the one on the wall right here. And you notice that bird is flying to the left. And I used this logo for a while. In fact, the first logo was just a little bird and nothing else. And of course, there was a Floyd's. There was a VP label and a Big Mamu label. Then after that, I decided, well, I better get something that's more of a commercial. Uh-huh. And I remembered the Bluebird label and RCA whacked in the 20s. I said, well, that's a bird label. We have a name, Soileau. It's not Soileau spelled like a bird, but it could be the word. So I decided I was going to call it Soileau Records. And I had the artist do me a logo, basically something like this. And I used it for a while. And then later on, I'm going to skip time here, but I had a friend from here, a musician from here, Alan Fontenot. He had a Cajun band in New Orleans, and he called me one morning. He says, Floyd, he says, they got a movie company here, Columbia Pictures, with the guy, Hard Knocks. What was his name? Charles Bronson. They were filming that movie in New Orleans. And he said, they want to use one of your records in the movie. I said, well, that's great. I said, which one? He says, La Valve de ma Chérie. I said, that's not my record. Oh, yes, it is. He said, I said, I don't believe. He said, look, me and the director got drunk last night watching your damn bird fly backwards on the jukebox playing that song. And that's when it came to me that the bird was the logo was designed wrong. The records flow this way, and that bird was flying backwards. So I said, well, I got to change the logo. So there you have the logo of the bird where it's actually traveling in the right direction.
What do you remember about Happy Fats, recording with Happy Fats? He was from Rain, I think.
He was from Rain. I didn't do much with Happy Fats. I had maybe 1 or 2 records on him. I had Adam Maybear, who was a prolific writer, He had some great songs, great stories he was writing, which I wanted. I wanted to hear some stories in song that was new instead of the, oh, baby, you left me to die over here by myself and all this kind of stuff. I wanted something else that had a little bit more meaning into the songs. I said, if you want to record for me, you're going to have some kind of a song, some kind of a story, if possible. And so Adam Hébert was the one that had Cette la jambe comme un petit oiseau. The one I love is like a little bird, flies from one arm to another. And then he had pour la dernière fois, for the last time. And he had, let's see, I'm trying to think of some of the others. And yeah, he had several numbers that have been re-recorded over the years. He was one of the first writer-singer on the Soileau label. Austin Peete had a few singles, but it was mostly old stuff. He's better known for the Opelousas Waltz and the, what was the other side of Opelousas Waltz now? I can't think of it. Anyhow, it was a two-step. And then he had a few other songs that he had. And then I had Aldous Roger.
These are the earliest.
It's the earlier guys. Aldous Roger had done some stuff. Well, before Aldous Roger, it was Lawrence Walker. Lawrence Walker had made some records for Coury back in the days of the 78s.
Okay.
And he came to see me because he heard there was some fool in Ville Platte that was putting out records again. And so everybody had quit making 45s, especially Cajun, and not 45, but Cajun 45s, and Cajun records, period. And so
you can keep talking.
I'm
just going to take photographs of the office if you don't mind.
All right, go ahead.
Okay.
So I said, well, yeah. I said, I'd like to be able to get some music on you. He had gone to a radio station in Eunice and recorded 4 songs. One of it was his big hit, Bon Temps Roulé. And
who was this who recorded that?
Lawrence Walker.
Okay.
And I had put that out on the Bon Temps Roulé. No, let's see, Bon Temps Records or something. No, I put that on the. I think I changed it to the Soileau label when I released it with him. I'm not positive. I'll have to look. It might have been the one on. It might have been on VP. He was one of the records on VP, I think. And anyhow, I ended up buying the. I wanted to give a royalty deal to him, and he says, "No, I don't want no royalty deal." He said, "I've had those royalty deals that don't pay off." He said, "I want some money." He said, "I want $200. No, I want $100 for the tape with all 4 songs on it." And I said, I might be a little strapped for $100 right now. I said, can I buy 2 of them now and buy the other 2 later after I've sold some of the first one? And he said, yeah, I want $60 for the first one and $60 for the second one if you won't buy them together. I said, okay. So I ended up putting out the Bon Temps Roulé by Lawrence Walker. And then Aldous Roger, another legend that had a few records done way back then, and he was on television. He came to see me. He wanted to record for me also. And he did that song Marie that was very good, and had one other side. I forget what the other side of it was. But anyhow, he was another legend that came to see me. And then later on, I had the very fortunate luck of recording D.L. Menard. D.L. recorded the most famous Cajun song ever now, The Back Door. And I like to not got it. I didn't know that until 10 years later. On their way here, the accordion player said that he wasn't interested in recording another song about getting drunk. And DL was insistent on doing it. And while I was changing the reels, it was just a little 7-inch reels that we had at the time, and I was doing single-track recordings. And I had done 2 songs. I had done, I think, 2 songs on that first reel, and I was going to change the reel. So while I was changing the reel, DL got on the guitar, and he started strumming and singing The Back Door. And I said, "That sounds pretty good. We're going to do that tonight." He said, "You could hear a pin drop." Then Mr. Elias Bado, the accordion player, said, "Yeah, we're going to do it." He didn't want to record that song. Thank God we recorded it, and it has since been, like I said, the most famous Cajun song ever. It surpassed Jolie Blonde.
Really?
Oh yeah, Rolling Stone or one of those magazines way back then did a survey of most popular songs ever, and that one came in at 77. Jolie Blonde was 99. And I mean, everybody that's playing music, if you're going to have a gig, you're going to have to play the back door once or twice a night.
Was there a band that backed Dio Menard? Like, was it Bado?
Elias Bado.
Oh, okay.
Elias Bado and the Louisiana Aces.
Okay.
That's the one that backed him on that song, and they backed him for album.
And that was the accordion player who didn't want to do it.
Well, Mr. Elias didn't want to do the song, but after we did it, and it sounded pretty good, and he had to okay, because I wanted that song. I heard it, and I liked it, so we put it out, and it just mushroomed. But 10 years later is when I found out the story of how they had argued from New Iberia to Ville Platte that night about wanting to do that particular song. And Mr. Elias, no, we're not going to do a song about getting drunk, and it was a story about Happy getting drunk, but regardless, and so. The Back Door was born, and it has been since unreal. Every major artist that I know of, some of them, the major Cajun artists, and not only Cajun artists, but some of the country artists have recorded the song as well.
Would you consider Hank Williams' Jambalaya a Cajun song?
He borrowed it from Cajun country, but I don't think it's a Cajun song. He just sings about jambalaya.
Yeah.
You know. And that he's coming to see his sweetheart in Louisiana, possibly, or in Cajun country. It's all right. I mean, it was a big hit. You can't argue with success.
Yeah.
If I'd have had that song, I'd have recorded it too. You know.
What do you remember about this song, which is just a novelty song, the Cajun rap song? How did this come about?
That was when rap music was starting to happen. That's a group from Moroville, I think, or near Marksville, somewhere in that area. They're in a Boyles Parish. And they had this group together, and they came up with this idea, and they put this out, and the stations were playing it. I mean, in fact, they had made a record on their own. It was a 45. They had gone to a studio someplace in Alexandria, I think, and they had recorded this, and they didn't know what to do with it. So I went to visit them. I said, guys, I'd like to take that thing and put it on my label and exploit it. I think I can make it further than you guys can. So they finally signed the contract, and we took the thing and we put it on our label and put it out. And it mushroomed. It did pretty good. And it's still getting played today. It was at the right time, and it had that Cajun bite, but it was a little too much Cajun before Cajun was cool. And just like the big hit that we had with Benny Grafe and his bunch, he called himself... what was he called himself? Jacques-No? No, not Jacques-No. I can't think this morning. Opelousas Sostand, Rufus Jacques-No.
Oh, that's a big hit, man.
That was a huge hit.
Yeah.
That was another thing about being a little too early before Cajun was cool. It was a little too early before Cajun became cool.
When was too early? What year?
Well, this was probably put out in... Now you're going to test my memory too badly.
70s, 80s?
Early 70s, I think.
Okay.
Early 70s would probably be about that time, or maybe mid 70s. I'm trying to think, because I'm trying to remember where I recorded. I recorded it. Wait a minute. I recorded that in my studio across. That was my third studio, and that was across the street. Opelousas Sostand. That was in my third studio. It was across from what was the City Hall now, but it was the American Security Bank at the time. It was a building that I bought the property, and I built it, and I set a studio in the back. And they came in. They had been in the mountains of Tennessee for the winter months, and a cousin of theirs, Charles Bailey, who followed the Boogie Kings a lot, and he and I got to know each other pretty good. He called me one day and he said, Floyd, he said, I have a cousin going to probably call you. They want to try to make a record. He said, I was a favor, would you listen to that material anyhow? If you don't like it, it's okay, but at least listen to it. I said, sure, I'll be glad to listen to it. So I get this phone call later on, and this guy says, I'm Benny Grafe. He said, I'm a cousin to Lloyd Bailey. I think Charles Bailey, you know my cousin. I said, yeah. He said, we'd like to come and do some songs with you. We did some songs while we were in the Tennessee mountains for the winter months. And he said, we'd like to do some recording. I said, well, what kind of songs do you have? He said, well, we have one called Opelousas Sostand. He said, I think you would like it. And I said, with a name like that, I have to hear it for sure. So I said, y'all come down.
What's Sostand mean? I mean, Opelousas, obviously.
Sostand is just a name for a guy.
Oh,
so
gotcha.
he gives a nickname for Opelousas Sostand. It was an old Cajun name. See, they borrowed some stuff to put this together. It was a happy-go-lucky, sing-along type of song. You could drink your beer and then sing along and have a good time with that record. It was ideal, right? When they came in, I said they were always like a bunch of racehorses getting ready to race for the first time. all lined up at the gate. When I gave them the signal, they cut loose. We cut that thing in one cut. And I said, boys, we got it. Oh, we can do better than that. They said, oh, no. I said, we can do some more. We did some more cuts on it, but number one cut was the one that we took on it. And it just blossomed. Everybody liked it. The college crowd got it, even though they couldn't speak French. They liked that kind of stuff. It was close to French. And it was a happy-go-lucky song. Everybody could sing along to it. I mean, it was the ideal ingredients for something like that to pop out. I remember some of the disc jockeys in North Louisiana, I got to call them and say, hey, guys, how about playing this song? Oh, no. I said, we can't play that. If we start playing that, we have to play that all day. People start calling us like crazy. We can't play that kind of stuff over there. I said, really? Okay, fine. So there was a dividing line. North Alexandria wouldn't play it. Everything south into East Texas, anything country was happening big time. It's still been a big hit ever since.
And what about this song, Let's Go Get Drunk, Johnny Allen?
That was one of Johnny's pet songs. He wrote a lot of stuff and was considered he's still considered probably the legend in swamp pop music. He played every weekend. He was playing 2 or 3 dances a weekend.
He's still around.
Oh, he's still around. Yeah, I talked to him again this week. He got into an accident. He's about a year. Let's see. I'm going to be 85 in November. I think he just made 85, and so we tease each other about our age. But he'd go riding his bicycle, and the last Swamp Pop reunion, the night before Mardi Gras that we have here every year, he was scheduled to perform, and that morning he tries to get on his bicycle in his carport and falls and breaks his hip, almost. And he was suffering like crazy, but he took a lot of medications, and they came and they put him in a wheelchair, and he performed, and then he hauled back. But I mean, his fans love him. Anywhere he goes, he brings a crowd, and he's got that. He got a lot of songs that he's done that have been really big. But he came up with this idea. He said, I want to do this song. And we did that in my studio. I don't think it was that studio. It was an earlier studio. But I went along with any ideas that he had, because I knew he was reaching his crowd. He knew what his crowd wanted, and he wanted a song that they could have a good time with. So that's why we did this.
What, and south to Louisiana?
South Louisiana was not mine originally. That was his idea, though. He did that for Dago Redlich in Crowley. He had a label called Viking Records.
Is it like a payoff north to Alaska?
Yeah,
okay.
Right. In fact, they didn't even get permission from the publisher of North to Alaska to do that thing. But the guy that wrote it was from Shreveport area, from the Louisiana Hayride. I forget his name. But they found out it was a big hit, so they said, okay, guys, no problem, but we're going to take the credit for that translation that y'all have. It's going to be in the other guy's name. So they okayed it, and I think the guy that had the label paid the royalties. I'm not sure.
Okay, so someone else wrote South to Alaska. And then
right, somebody else wrote the North to Alaska. Johnny Horton had the big hit on that.
Yeah.
He did a translation or a borrowing of the lyrics and changed things over and used a melody and had a big hit called South to Louisiana.
Yeah.
And at that time, they didn't know there were regulations that you weren't supposed to do all that. But once the record was out and it was selling, But were
you saying someone that Johnny Allen worked with did it, or they took the translation from someone else, or
no? Johnny Allen. That was Johnny's idea.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Johnny's idea.
Now, some of these I don't know what about, but this I know. South to Louisiana is probably a big hit. That was the last time. I don't know if this was a hit or not.
That wasn't a big hit for him. The biggest hit he had was on the flip side of Somewhere on Skid Row. That was a Merle Haggard song that he sang, and we did a swamp pop arrangement to it. And on the other side, he did a Chuck Berry song.
Oh,
The Promised Land. And I knew the other side was going to do well on jukeboxes, but I didn't know about The Promised Land. It was an up-tempo thing, and usually they would have had a saxophone or something in there. Now, I stopped the cut. I said, hold on. I said, let's stop that. Let's leave that open, that middle break for the break, instrumental break. Leave that open. I'll get Belton Richard to come in with his occasion accordion and let him do occasion accordion lick in that. Yeah, I said, that sounds pretty good. Do you think Belton will do it? I said, yeah, he'll do it. So Belton came in, he heard what was going on, and when he took that in one take, he laid that accordion lick down in there. Well, we didn't know it at the time, but some of these records end up, I had companies over there in Europe, and one company in particular was marketing my stuff, and some jock over there got a hold of it and started playing The Promised Land. And man, they got the warning real bad. So we licensed his version of it to a company that put it out. And about the time it was climbing up the British charts, RCA releases their version of The Promised Land on Elvis. So ours just dropped down. But ours didn't die. The fans were still there. And another company came back about a year and a half later and said, well, we'd like to license that thing and try to put it up again, and we'd try to get it up the charts. They brought it up to number 2 on the charts. Sold about 300,000 copies in the UK. But it got included in all these, these mixture albums that they come out, the best of country, the best of rock, the best of whatever. And in all these countries, Australia, New Zealand, England, Germany, they all had these best of, and that cut of his was included in that. So his version of Promised Land sold about 4 million copies or more. And if we count all these albums, all put together.
But it started on...
It started on our label here, on Gin Records.
Okay.
And in fact, I gave him a gold record for it because I knew he had sold over 1 million copies of it. In one version, one form or another. The other version that I sold 1 million copies that I got, I gave him I sold 1 million copies of. I didn't sell it, but I stole a lot of it, but I leased it, and the record did it. Was my version of Tommy McLean's "Sweet Dreams." Okay. I gave Tommy McLean a gold record for that one, because the company in Philadelphia was using the same pressing plant that I was using in Houston. And the pressing plant in Houston pressed over 1 million copies of it. So they said, I want you to have a gold record. I said, well, let's make it to the artist, and I'll give it to him. And so that was my first gold record. Then Johnny's was the second gold record that I had.
Do you remember this? Because I went through a phase where I was listening to truck driver songs, and I found this, Gear Jammer's Helper. It's a truck driving song.
Come again? Now that was a song. I had an engineer from... He originally worked for a studio in Baton Rouge, Joe Evans. I hired him to come run my studio when that was the third studio I built. And at that time, I was bringing in a 4-track and an 8-track. And I said, I don't have time to fool with all this anymore. I'll bring him in, but you'll have to record. He had some country guys that he had been recording in Baton Rouge, and they wanted to follow him because he was a good engineer. He could give you that Nashville sound even though you didn't go to Nashville. He was a musician. He could do all that. So they would come in. That's something that he got in the guys to come in and record. And sometimes they'd do a deal where we'd sell them the studio time and maybe 300 copies of the record, and they could go out and sell some, and we'd sell some. If we sell them, we'd pay some royalties. Whatever they sold, they kept the money. But they would pay for the studio time. And initially, it might be a $300 deal or something like that. But they would come in, and we did several of those. And to help these guys out.
So you weren't intimately involved, just like the engineer arranged this? And
when I hired Joe, I pulled back, and he worked for me about 2 years. Prior to that, I did most of the recording myself.
Why did you pull back? Just because?
Well, I pulled back because I had other interests. I had bought an interest in the Ville Platte Gazette. I had always had a fascination with printing. I had a print shop for a while. And we had put out a publication called The Swap and Shop. It was one of these shopper deals where we'd let everybody put an ad in and we'd sell ads. And the post office made the most money out of it because I spent all the money buying postage to send our publication to every mailbox in Evangeline Parish and the surrounding area. We printed 6,000 copies of it. And it was very popular. And then when the Gazette came up for sale, I talked to my partners. I said, let's buy this Gazette thing. We'll be into the newspaper business. We won't have to do this thing anymore. So we did. So I was into that for a while. And so I had a good staff, and Joe was handling the recording thing. I had a business that was big when the color TVs came out, RCA TVs, and they had those beautiful console cabinets with that 25-inch set right there. You had a wonderful stereo with big speakers in those wood cabinets, sounding like a band in your own home, and they were popular. I sold so many of those, I got my first trip out of state to Acapulco because I sold so many of those things for RCA. So I mean,
you were selling TVs for RCA?
Yeah, I had my record store was selling TVs and stereos and whatnot, and. We sold so many of them, we earned a damn trip to Acapulco. And I had never been out of state, let alone out of the country. I'd never been on an airplane before. The wife and I took that trip.
This was in the 60s, maybe?
Yeah, I think it was in the late 60s.
What do you... I didn't even get the artist name on this photo, but it's definitely French.
What is that? No. Le bal à nos cragos. Oh, that was a big find. Oh, this guy was Marion Marcotte.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, the storyteller.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he kept sending me some tapes. He was in New Orleans. He had been recording for a New Orleans label, and he was singing some country songs that he'd write in French, and it wasn't happening for him. He wasn't happy with that at all. And he started sending me some demos he'd recorded. And I listened. I didn't see the songs were too commercial, and his voice as a singer wasn't too commercial, I didn't think. But I didn't want to say no. You never know who somebody come up with something. So he sends me another tape. First on the tape was a song. And then I was listening to that tape in my little music store, the first one I had on Main Street, I think, or second one I had on Main Street at the time. And I had that little office up front, and I had a tape recorder there, and I had some 45s in the back. And I was starting to listen to his tape, and two guys came from the local jukebox company to buy some 45s to put it on jukebox. So I went with the guy to help him pull some records, and his partner stayed there in the front. But the tape was rolling. And after that song, the story comes up in French, and this guy starts laughing like crazy back there. He said, what the hell he's laughing at back there? So we went back, and I rewound the tape, and we played the story. And the first one was L'Annoncement. It was the story about a floor bouncer at a Cajun dance. And he wanted to keep the peace, but he was the only one there, and he wasn't all that physical, but he wanted people to think he was very muscular and physical, and don't start any trouble because I'll really get through, I'll throw you out, and this kind of stuff. That was the story of L'Annoncement. So I asked the guys, I said, if I put that on a record, would y'all put that in jukeboxes? Oh, yeah, man. He said, us Cajuns down here would have a ball drinking our beer and listening to that guy's stories. So I called him, and I said, Marion, we're going to do a record. I said, I want the one you sent me, but I want that story as well. You do? I said, yeah, I want that story as well. Okay, so I have some other stories. I said, oh, good, we'll make some more stories up. We'll see what this one does. We put it out, and it was a success. Disc jockeys were playing it a lot, and people were laughing about it. But the second one he sent me was, what was it? L'histoire à Dudley's story. It was a story about a young man who had eloped with this farmer's daughter. And the farmer had put him out in a little cabin out on his place, but he found out the boy was sort of mistreating his daughter, so he invited him into his house. And he describes while he was getting into his house, he was barefoot. He said, I never walked on that carpet before, or something like that, you know. And then he offers me a drink. He said, in that drink, in that glass, he said, there was some ice cubes. And he said the ice cubes would hit against the rim, and you could hear ting, 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 ting. And he said, after I finished that drink, he told me, he said, now I understand you've been mistreating my daughter. And he fussed me out good, and he grabbed me by the seat of my pants and threw me through a window. I landed in a rose bushes full of thorns, and I couldn't get out of there fast enough. And there was some other parts of the story that was fantastic. It was funny as all hell if you could understand French. And the story took off. And his success as a storyteller took off. I said, Marion, you got to do some more. So he did some more. That's l'histoire à nos cragos. Le bal à nos cragos was about a Cajun dance and all the mischievous pranks that they would play on people coming into the dances and so forth. One of the stories was, I don't know if he told that one or not, but there was a guy that came in with a white horse, and he came to that dance, and he wasn't from that area, but he wanted to dance with the women in that area at that dance. So somebody came in and told him later, said, you better go see about your horse. He said, somebody painted him pretty good. So he went out there, and he looked at it. That white horse was all spotted, painted, all kind of colors, threw paint on it. He goes back inside. He's mad as all hell. He said, I want to know who painted that horse. Some big old guy comes up. He said, I painted that horse. What else you got to say? He said, the first coat dry, you can put the second coat. He said.
Now this 45 I got a long time ago. As it seems to be a copy of Deo, the big
Pombro.
Yeah,
right, Deo. Yeah, that's Johnny Allen's invention.
It was his idea.
Yeah, that's what he did. He took that Deo song they had, and he put it out. That's Johnny Allen's invention.
This is another story.
That's another Marcotte. Yeah. Let's see. J'ai parti marron avec Madame Ardon. That's a song. That's not a story. That was one of his songs that he had. But it was sort of a funny song.
Oh, there's the history.
Okay, this one here, L'Histoire de Dudley. That's the big one that started his career. That one there. That was the funny. You couldn't go to a soiree anywhere of Cajun people where somebody would not try to tell one of his stories from one of these records, and everybody would laugh. They try to repeat it. He was the talk. The priests loved his humor because it was clean humor, and they were most of them French-speaking priests in this area. So he was a big fan.
Was it 70s, 1970s, 60s?
Ah, Jesus! I'm trying to think right now.
Well, I could look up the.
It was sometime in the late 60s, I think. Mid to late 60s. That's
Okay.
when I first put his stuff out. Because the numbers are small, and his first one, I think, was one of the early gin numbers. I had him on gin, and after that I switched all the French stuff to Soileau.
These numbers, what are you talking about?
Yeah, the release numbers right there.
Okay.
See, those record numbers there are small. What number is that? 120?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. See, that was the 20th release on that label, and after that, I switched all the French stuff to Soileau.
Okay.
That's what I was doing. I had the.
Do you remember this Rufus Jagno?
Oh, that's the one we just talked about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That one is Port Barry. That's the other side of.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, all right.
Appaloosa
Okay.
Sostan.
Okay.
Yeah. Now here we got some colored labels, but I don't remember who that is. Which one was
Louis
that?
Moe?
Huh?
Moe? True Love.
Okay, that's one of the guys from New Iberia. I don't remember too much.
Okay.
On that one.
Now this is a great version of Night Train.
Yeah, because the band was the Boogie Kings. They were a tough R&B sounding band. They were a white group. They had a horn section out the mine, and they were all top-notch musicians. They had a legacy down here for the longest. Then they had some kind of argument, and they split. Clint had one group of the guys, and one of the horn guys organized another thing. So you had two Boogie King bands playing in the area.
Is this the flip side? Try Me? I didn't even.
Yeah, anything Clint West had was backed up by the Boogie Kings.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is Rod Bernard.
Yeah, right. Rod came to me early on. I had recorded the early Boogie Kings, the original Boogie Kings group, which was about a 6-piece group from Eunice. And it was a typical swamp pop thing. It had done fairly well, but he was jealous about it because they were getting played on the jukebox, and his earlier records were nothing going because the guy in Opelousas, I didn't know that he had made a couple of records in Opelousas. The guy didn't know what to do with that. He just took the money to put the records out. That's all he did. But when I put something out, I had a following, a good understanding with the jukebox industry. We sold most of our records to jukeboxes. Everybody bought up generous Soileau records when they come out because they would get the spins. And he called me one day, he said, Floyd, he said, you did a record on the Boogie King. He said, I'd like to do one for you also. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, a guy from Opelousas wrote a song. He told me I could record it. And I said, what's the name of it? He said, This Should Go On Forever. I said, with a title like that, I think it'd be a good song. And I wasn't married then, so I just started my company, and I just started my record shop. And I was going out with my wife at the time. I mean, she wasn't my wife at the time, that's who I was dating. And we were talking about getting married, and I didn't have any money. So that record came out, and it happened. It started to sell. It was a swamp pop thing, and like Jimmy Clanton was selling for Ace over there in New Orleans, he started selling over here for us big time. In East Texas, it was selling. So I got a call from the folks at Chess Records, and they said, now, we understand you got a regional record out there that is happening. We'd like to distribute it for you nationally. And I said, yeah, I'd be interested in that. He said, well, what would you take? I said, well, the first thing I'd take would be $1,000 advance royalty. Now, this is back in the early 50s. And I say early 50s. Yeah, I was in 57, mid-50s, 57. And 57, because I got married. No, it was before that. Because I got married in 59. It was in 57. So I said, $1,000 advance royalty. I said, number 2, he's got to appear on Dick Clark's American Bandstand. Everybody watched the Dick Clark American Bandstand in black and white TV in the afternoons when they came out of school. And
So this was Chess wanted to release the record.
That Chess was going to release the record.
I saw a photo.
It was one on Argo.
Okay, I saw a photo of Rod Bernard with Dick Clark.
Yeah.
It was at the K-Bon studio.
Right. He and Dick Clark hit it off. Later on, he got Dick Clark to actually send him a video of his performance. And Dick Clark was a good guy. I mean, he took a liking to Rod. Anyhow, it happened, and I said, oh, it's got to be played on WLAC Nashville. That station at night was a station everybody listened to. They played all that rhythm and blues stuff. And so he said, I can take care of all three things. I said, well, send your man over and let's get it done. So right away, they came over with the check, picked up the master. 2 days later, I get a call from a Dallas distributor. He wanted to buy 5,000 copies of the record. I said, well, get it from Argo Chest now because I don't have it no more. And it just mushroomed. He went on Dick Clark, and it just happened. And I, with my half of the money, I was able to get married and got things going. That's the title. This should go on forever. It couldn't have been a better song for me.
And your wife's name was?
Jinver. Jinver. That's where I got that name for JIN Records. I was making points. I wasn't married when I did that.
What do you remember about Cammy Doucet?
Cammy Doucet recorded for the Millers.
And I'm noticing the spelling of his name here.
What's that?
It's like phonetically spelled.
Yeah, right. What's that? What's that one there?
Cajun Cowboy.
Cajun Cowboy. Okay, yeah. So Cammy was recording for the Millers for a while, and he came and did some stuff for me too. But he was a DJ in Crawley.
Yeah, right.
And so and he wrote some stuff, and I said I'd like to have him. So we started making some records. That's not the best thing he had for me. I don't know what the other side of that was. I remember our songs by the flip sides mostly.
Yeah. His big hit is like "Mama, Am I Not Your Little?"
Yeah, "Mama, I'm Still Your Little Boy."
Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was a monster for me on that. But I had another one that happened that was even better than that, called "Chamor Atelier, je vais te montrer comment danser." Hold my false teeth and I'll show you how to dance.
Oh, this should
you
go
got
on.
it there?
Yeah. No, this should go on forever.
Oh, yeah, this should go on forever, okay. Right. Yeah, we stole this.
So the Cammy Doucet was the...
Yeah, hold my false teeth. And tell you how we got that story. We had gone with a priest to Henderson to go eat some crawfish at Pat's Seafood Restaurant. And I had a couple that lived next door to me, friends of mine, Pat and Joy Moran. And I forget the priest's name, but we took him with us to go to eat over there. And after we were eating, we're coming back, and somebody, I don't know who mentioned something about La Poussière. La Poussière was a nightclub in that area. And they asked him we'd never been there.
Where is it at? I thought it was
somewhere around Bro Bridge.
Okay.
Somewhere's around there. It's still there, and it's an icon place. And anyhow, they said, we never been there before. I said, we can find it before we go back. Let's go see what's going on, because it was a Friday night. I'm sure they have a dance. We went there that night, and we in the inside. We stayed in a while, and that night looked like, I don't know what it was, but all the men wore those red jumpsuits. They might have been from working in the industry or something, but everybody had red jumpsuits. And the old guys they were two-stepping and turning like crazy, and them dances like crazy, and having a great ball. So the next morning, I'm shaving, and the wife is looking at me. She's still laughing from our episode last night. She said, that some of them old guys were dancing pretty fast on that dance floor last night. I wonder if they lose their false teeth. I said, what you said? She said, I wonder if they lose their false teeth. They dance so fast, and she'd laugh. I said, that's an idea for a song. Cammy was doing an album for me at my studio, my third studio there, and my engineer was cutting it, but he was recording, and I went to see him and said, Cammy, I got an idea for a song. I said, I told him the story about how the wife said some of these people with false teeth, they're dancing too fast, maybe they lose their false teeth, just in joking. He said, I'll write a song about that. I said, okay. Then he came back 2 nights later, hold my false teeth and I'll show you how to dance. And people loved it. They laughed about it, but they loved it. And it was a hit for him, along with Mama, I'm Still My Little Boy. And he had another one called Who Stole the Pies? C'est qu'à voler les tartes. You know how people would make their ties and they put them in the windowsill to cool off?
Yeah.
Somebody would go by and steal them. So there's a story about that. And so he had 3 or 4 songs that did pretty good.
And then I think he did one, which is in French, but it seems to me to be a version of Alvin and the Chipmunks, like a squirrel.
Yeah, he did that for the Millers.
Okay.
He did that for the Millers, yeah.
Do you remember this Johnny Allen song? These records are not in the great. The Prisoner song?
That's an old song, an old country western hit from way back. He liked to do it. He said he had good response to it when he'd sing it, and we cut it. And it sold a little bit. That one didn't sell all that much, but it sold.
That's a Can We Do Say.
Okay,
I'll just tell you a little bit.
Yeah, right.
Hey, Harry, this must be a Christmas thing.
Yes, a Christmas thing. That's Harry Fontenot.
Yeah.
He was he was a character. He was a crop duster during the crop dusting season. He'd make his money, and then the rest of the year he could have party playing his accordion, playing, partying with people and whatnot. And he'd come with these ideas, and some of his stuff was crazy, but I said it might sell, you know. And it was funny in a way. And he would stutter when he would call me on the phone. He'd stutter like crazy. I'd say, "Hold on, Harry, sing it." So he'd have to sing me his message, and I could understand him. He'd get excited. He'd stutter like crazy, but when he sang, he didn't stutter at all.
Was this early in Wayne Toups? This is on Soileau.
What's that?
Every Man Needs a Woman, Wayne Toups and Zida Cajun. Was this early in his career?
Wayne Toups. No, I tell you what happened with that. He came to, I don't know what the other side, I don't remember putting the other side of that, but now, he came to see me after a 4-year battle to get loose from the Millers and the contractual thing.
Okay.
He wasn't satisfied. And after 4 years, he finally got loose. Then he decides he's going to try on his own to get back on a major label, and he's starting to do a session, an album session, someplace at that studio on the Bayou there. I forget the name of it. He's looking for somebody to release it, and he's seeing he's not getting a major label invite, so he comes to me as a last resort and wanted to know if I want to release the album. I said, yeah, I'd be glad to. I said, by the way, I said, are you finished with your song selection? He said, no, why? I said, I've got the rights. I've got the rights finally to a song that I didn't think I could get anybody to use, but I said, you might like it. And I played him the demo on it, and he said, yeah, I like it. I'd like to record it. I said, great. And I said, one more thing. I said, I saw you do a version of The Back Door on one of the Cotton Festival performances you did in Ville Platte several years back. And I said, you rocked that song like crazy. I said, you never recorded it. I said, no, because he said the Millers didn't want me to do it. It was your song. I said, well, I want you to do it. I want you to do it for DL's sake as well. I said, he'll make royalties on it as well. He said, well, I'm going to do that. So he put The Back Door in it, but he recorded a hell of a version of that particular song that we're talking about here was Take My Hand.
Okay.
That was a monster song. It's been his signature song since. We sold over 100,000 copies of the damn thing. And it's been his signature song since then.
And you were the one who...
Well, I had the publishing rights to it.
Okay.
He was 12 years old when he wrote the song. And he had recorded it with his dad on the demo, and they had given me the demo tape of it at a festival that had gone to. The father slipped the tape in my pocket. He said, listen to that when you get home. And I called him back. I said, I'd like to have a publishing rights on that. And I think I can put your song out in one of our Swamp Gold things. He sounded like Fast Domino, the father did. But the son's song was a little teenager type thing. With the arrangement he had, it wasn't quite just right. But there was something about the song that still rang a bell in myself. So I finally, after saying no to the publishing rights for a while, I finally said yes. I said, I want the publishing rights to it. I want to try to get somebody to record it.
Are you a musician yourself? Are you a musician?
No. My father was a fiddle player, and my dad before him, my grandfather before him was a fiddle player. They played house dances. My brother played the fiddle and the accordion. I never played nothing. Even the radio, I'd get static if I tried to play it. But somehow or another, I must have inherited something. Plus, my years, that year and a half or 2 years I was at KVPI, was a big semi-college education to me about music.
You were a teenager, right?
I was a teenager. I still had 1 year of high school left when I got the job. I got the job because I was fluent in French. They needed somebody to do the French news and stuff. And it exposed me to all the different genres of music, from the big band era to the hard rhythm and blues, the Zydeco, Cajun, and the swamp pop stuff. All those different kinds. We were playing that at the radio station, and I was picking up on all that. And I was mixing mixing stuff and learning about overmodulation and so forth, and learning to mix the sounds to make sure everything is right on the records for my little studio work that I had. I had 2 small studios before I had the third one, and all this was an education for me. So I have to say this, and I've told it time and time again, if it were not for KVPI, I don't know where I'd be today. It was such a break. I was at the right place at the right time. Music was exploding as the entertainment at that time. They didn't have all this stuff here. They didn't have those 350 television stations you could watch. They didn't have all of that. It was music. Everybody loved music, but they had their own music collection. You'd share it with folks. You'd have the dances at home. You'd go out dancing to it every night. Plenty of places to go dancing, seeing the bands live. It was a fantastic time. Right place, right time. I fell right into it.
All right. Yeah, and you still call into KVPI once a week at least, huh?
I still call.
Yeah.
I called to get on that program that I told them to put on the air.
But what do you remember about this one? Doris Matt?
Doris Mott. That was a crazy thing. Doris with me was always a feminine name, but he was nicknamed. He was named Doris.
That's a guy. Okay, I didn't.
That's a guy. That's why you thought it was a girl also.
Yeah.
And he had some songs that sounded real good, and he had a band that sounded pretty good, and every record he made sold because of the songs he had. And he had a good voice. And again, his records sold on jukeboxes. I had this thing with jukeboxes. They knew that when I put something out, for a 45, I wanted to make sure that 45 was a good thing for the jukeboxes, because there were a lot of jukeboxes in the area. And if you can get a hit, you can probably sell 1,500 copies, 2,000 copies, just in the jukebox industry, just in our area.
Your first 45s were for jukeboxes, right?
Basically, well, it was not only for that, but that was when RCA came out with the 45s to take the place of the old 78s. And Columbia, they came out with the LP format for the albums, okay? But the 45 was RCA's. It was almost an unbreakable record unless you dropped it on the edge. And everybody was going to that now, because your old records, the 78s, were very breakable and they didn't sound all that good, and it scratched pretty good, pretty fast. So they improved the sound with that 45. And they came out with that little record changer. Where's it at?
I see it.
Back there. Uh-huh. And you could plug that in back of your RCA black and white television set and use the speaker and amplification, and it sounded great, and it would drop 12 45s one after the other. That made that thing explode. Then other manufacturers came out with the similar players and so forth. And the jukeboxes gladly got rid of those old 78 jukeboxes and put out the 45 jukeboxes. They could put more records in there. They were limited to very few 78s at first, but then when the 45s came out, they had about 120 selections, on there, and that was a good thing. And the guys would tell me, said, Floyd, don't cut them things too long now. We want that thing short, like maybe 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes at the most. We want that record to play in a hurry, get off that, get some more money, play another record in there. And so it made sense. If the records were too long, they were taking too much time, and there's not enough money could be played into it. So I would tell my guys, don't give me some long entry for a 45 record. I want something right to the point. And I said, the guys that are listening, they give you about 20 seconds to listen to the beginning of that record. And then they'll buy it or they'll reject it. So we were concentrating on jukeboxes when we cut the 45s. But also, I always said, give me a song that'll hit them in the heart or hit their funny bone. Then you'll have a hit.
What do you remember this? The Cajun Trio?
That was Harry Fontenot, the one we talked about before. And we called it the Cajun Trio because he had Clint West on the drums, and he had somebody else playing some guitar play. A guy from Vidrine, I think. Elvin Bogard would play the electric guitar. And that was the trio. And he came up with these ideas for a 45. He didn't sell a lot of 45s, but he sold enough to make enough money to do another record. And his stuff is still in demand today for collectors and whatnot.
I mean, this one is clearly just a novelty.
Yeah, that's mainly he had novelties. Mainly that
Cajun
was what
twist.
He did.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a novelty. The people liked that too. They laughed about it, but they bought it.
Cankton Two-Step, Lehman Prejean and the Happy Playboys of Scott.
That was a typical Cajun record. Nothing special.
Okay.
They wanted a record. They wanted to be on Soileau, so we put it out.
Jim Olivier, he was on TV, right?
Yeah, he was a big star on television, And but he liked the music and whatnot very much, and he had a good voice. And he had his friend Boulez, who passed away just recently, B.J. Boulez, B-O-U-L-E-T.
Okay.
And B.J. wrote every original song that Jim had on his albums. B.J. was the writer.
Now, was Olivier a TV host first, and then
he was a TV host, and he was always a TV host. He never performed live, as far as Cajun music, but he recorded. You know, he was like an Eddie Arnold. Eddie Arnold was a big record maker, but he never made any performance.
What was Jim Olivier's show? I mean, I didn't grow up here.
He was early in the morning, like Passepartout, I think.
Okay.
That's what they called it. It was an early morning show. And he had the fans. And so naturally, when he put the record out, we put a single out first, and we did an album. It was an album we're doing. We're doing an album, and he did this album called Le Mariage à Pic et Pac, the marriage on the rocks. You know, everything was going wrong, and he had this girl do it with him. He was telling her that, you know, she wasn't cleaning the house and she wasn't doing this and wasn't keeping up the place, and she said, "You're gonna find one to talk," and she starts criticizing him, and then towards the end. She's throwing, and you can hear some sound effects. It's like she's throwing some stuff at him, and he's saying, "Okay, don't throw it, don't stop." You know, that's it. It was a funny thing, and we sold over 6,000 copies of that album just on the strength of that song. I had to put it on a 45 for the jukeboxes as well. It was a novelty. But now later on, he had he had one other one, something about the smoking, trying to quit smoking.
Was he KLFY? What TV?
It was aimed at KLFY Channel 10.
Okay.
And then he got some kind of a riff or something, and he got off of Channel 10. I think he tried to go on Channel 3, but I don't think it worked out after that.
Okay.
But anyhow.
He had a song about smoking?
Yeah, he had a song about smoking. It was in the album. I don't think we did a 45 of that one.
Oh, here we got the Cajun Trio again, Mamou Hillbillies.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty short.
Yeah.
Nancy Tab.
That's a good story for me. Here, and I learned something about that. That was Mr. Marcantel from Eugenics' sister.
I talked with him. Yeah,
right. Yeah. That was his sister, and she wanted to sing, and she had this idea of taking this John Denver song and making some changes in the lyrics. You know, she had the rice fields of Louisiana instead of the Rocky Mountains, like he was singing his song, whatever. So she borrowed the song and changed it around, and we put a 45 on it, and it started to do well. So I said, well, shit, we're going to do an album of this stuff. I'm going to take some country classics, and we're going to let you sing them, and we're going to do it. But I knew, I told her, I said, I don't think we ought to change any kind of wording in those songs. I think we have problems maybe with that. I said, let's make sure we do just a translation, but it's still okay. What she did with her music, she was able to capture those people from around here that were Cajun descent, but wouldn't come close to a Cajun recording within 20 feet of it. It's like, that's not my thing. You know, I don't like that. But when they heard her sing that stuff in French, and it sounded so good, they started coming in to buy her album. And but before we had the album out, when we produced the album, my idea was to put French and English words to all the songs on the inner sleeve, print the inner sleeve with all that. And but I worried myself. I said, you know, there's such a thing as changing it around, but putting it in print might be something else. I said, I better call the publishers and ask for permission, tell them what we're doing. So I called them, and all of the publishers agreed except John Denver's publisher. He said, hell no. He said, everybody's been abusing John's songs, and I got to put a stop to it. I said, well, look, I said, I was on my knees because the album's already being pressed, and we had production, everything going on, except we had not done this, they hadn't pressed the record yet. We had to rent the sleeves. So I was almost on my knees. I said, look, this is something to keep the French language alive in the state of Louisiana. There'll probably never any copies sold outside of here, and on and on and on. He said, all right. He said, go ahead and put it in the album, but don't print no lyrics. I don't want no lyrics on that thing whatsoever. And any translation she's done, she's got to turn it over to John. I said, I understand that. That's fine. You can send over whatever paper you want. She'll sign it. So today, if you find a copy of her album, you'll find the translations to the songs except that one. On that inner sleeve.
Okay.
But anyhow, but that was Mary Ann. That was Nancy Morcantel, and she sold 2 albums very well and did well for herself, and she got some engagement gates off of that. But she enticed some more people to come in to the language and everything else, and admitting I'm French and I can understand what she's singing. I love what she's singing, you know. So that's what happened with Nancy.
Do you remember recording with Nathan Abshire?
Oh yeah, I got Nathan to do his whole classic thing that he had done years ago with Dewey Baffa for Miller, but Miller had called it Pine Grove Blues, but it was spelled differently, and I spelled it correctly, Pine Grove Blues. And
how did they spell it on the other record?
I think they had Pine Grove in one word.
Oh,
Okay, and so I went with Pine Grove Blues. And I checked, and there was no Pine Grove Blues like that. So I said, well, I guess he didn't sign no contract with Miller. So I said, I'm going to make sure that he signs it, and we get the thing right. And I wanted to get some BMI royalties, because he was going to get some royalties through me. The other way around, he probably wouldn't have got anything. And then when I put it out, Miller contested it with BMI. So I said, well, I've got a contract here where I went before a notary, and he signed it. Here's my copy of it. He gave me the rights to it. I said, I don't think Mr. Miller has a contract with the man. And he said, oh, I had a house fire at my house and some of my papers burned. I said, well, sorry, if you don't have the papers, we have to go with the guy that's got the paperwork. And so he dropped it after that.
So you have the publishing
I have the publishing rights on
The
it.
Pine Grove Blues.
Yes.
That's a huge.
It was a huge record. It's slipped off since then. The popularity has slipped off, but back then it's still getting a lot of airplay, you know, and all this. But I mean, so I have the publishing rights on it, and I have Nathan's version of it redone with Dewey Baffa.
Do you remember this artist? This one, I don't know his name at all.
Let's see.
Christmas Eve on the Big Bayou.
Okay, that was a guy. He was a columnist for the Daily World in Opelousas, a school teacher and a columnist, and he had an idea. He had this poem. He would make a Christmas poem song like about exactly what he says: Christmas Eve on the Big Bayou, and he would talk about all the animals and all this kind of stuff, and what the kids could expect for Christmas and all that. And when he came to record it, I said, hey, I don't think we're going to sell that, but if you want to do it, I said, I'm going to do it. He said, I'll pay to have it done. I said, well, if you want to buy a certain amount of copies of the record, I'll have it done for you. And I got Joey Vance to record it. Joe could play the guitar, so he played the background music to it. And we put this thing out, and people loved it. They wanted to send it to their people away and everything else, and it played for the kids so the kids could learn something in French. So it was a success. And I'm still paying his son the royalties off that damn thing over the years.
Is he related to Todd or Ortego? Is that the same name?
He's Ortego?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, yes, that was his name.
No, but I mean, is he related to?
No, he's not related to. Oh, I see, not related. All the Ortegos over here, distant cousins or something, other family. You know, the Soileaus, all distant cousins.
Okay.
Fontenot's, all distant cousins. But yeah, he was. I
So
guess.
you were Jim Soileau from KVPI. You were somehow related.
Distant cousin from far back, you know.
Okay.
And I did some typing for him. I was flunking typing class. And I went home and told the folks that's probably the only class I'm going to flunk in high school. They said, what can we do about this? If I buy a typewriter and learn to type at home, maybe I can do it. Make a long story short, I got a Royal typewriter. I started practicing. I got real good at it to where I wasn't making any errors. I was doing so good that the typing teacher said, you don't have to take class today. You're going to do some typing for Jim Soileau. He's got some talks that he's going to do for FBLA and all this stuff. So I type all this stuff. And he remembered me from that. And so when Chris Duplichin, the station manager, when Jim was leaving to go to college after he finished his high school, he said, do you have some friend of yours that speaks French and maybe could do what you're doing here? He said, I have someone. He said, call him, tell him to come see me. So he introduced me to Chris, and that's how I got my job at KVPI.
Now this, I know, was a huge hit. My Tutu.
Oh, was that a roller coaster ride? Wow.
This was like in the 80s, right? Mid-80s, I think.
Biggest thing we ever had. Biggest international song we ever had. Unbelievable success with this thing. I can't tell you how it just blew my mind how a simple little song like that can happen. We had it I had my pressing plant at the time. We were pressing an album for him of some of his songs that he had written. Some of them had been released on 45s before. And we get this album out to some of the radio stations and whatnot. And Zydeco music had not been selling on the other side of the Mississippi River, per se. It was sold on this side. And my salesman on the phone was selling to shops, and he said, Floyd, they got some of the shops across Baton Rouge that are starting to buy this album. I don't know what's going on. He said, you ought to call Sidney and find out. So Sidney found out that there was a black jock in Baton Rouge that was playing this song off the album at the dances he would do and everything. People loved it, and that's why they were buying the album for that song. So I got that album out and I listened to that song. I said, shit, that's the lousiest cut on the whole damn album. There's no meat to it, there's no bottom, there's no nothing to it. I called Sid, I said, come over here. So he came from Lake Charles. I said, listen to this thing. Oh, I know what you're going to tell me. He said, you know, I had that song in a composition book for about 2 years or so. He said, I just picked it up. I needed one more song to finish the album, and I hurried up and put that together. I said, well, you hurried too much. That's the song they want. I said, we better fix this thing up, or we ain't going to travel. It's not going to travel much.
So you had produced the album?
I had produced the album with him, because I put producing in a different extent. He had done some recordings on a little bit of recording at his house.
Okay.
He brought them to me. I took care of getting the jackets and the records going and distribution and everything else. And I was a manufacturer and co-producer of sorts. But when I came to this, I said, we got to fix this. He said, don't worry, I'm going to take it to my house. I'll fix it. I said, you know the old saying, don't screw with it too bad because you're going to mess it up. Well, he went back. He added the hand clapping. He added more bottom to it and a little bit more emphasis on the whole thing. He brought it back. It's a different cut. I said, now what I got to do, I got to change that master that we're pressing on that album on that side. Got to remaster that side, and I got to change that master on the cassette side because cassettes were selling at that time. So I got the manufacturer to change the master plates on them, on both of them, and we issued some new copies of the album and new copies of the cassette. And the new copies of the album went to the disc jockeys, and we told them to get rid of that album because that cut was not the right cut. There's something wrong with it. Play the good cut. Now the collectors, if they find out, if they know the true story, they're always looking for something this is the very first. If you could find a copy of the Maison de Soul album that's called my Zydeco Shoes Got the Zydeco Blues, it's by Rockin' Sydney, and My Toot Toot is in there. If you open that album and you look on that side that's got My Toot Toot, if it has 1024 RE, that's the new version. If it doesn't have RE on it, that's the original master that had a bad cut on it.
But the 45 is only from the new master.
45 is only from the new master. My jukebox operator said you got to put that on 45.
And that's the one that like blew up.
Well, that's the one. That's okay. So they loved it, and they played. New Orleans was always not too much in favor of playing what they call music from the country. They called us the country. But if you went down Bourbon Street, any joint that you would play, you go through, you could hear a version, you could hear a copy of My Toot Toot being played. It might be the beginning or the middle or the end, but there was always My Toot Toot playing all the way down Bourbon Street.
I thought Zydeco was big in New Orleans. It came out of New Orleans.
It wasn't big in New Orleans until this thing showed up.
But it didn't come out of New Orleans.
And what they did after that...
Where does Zydeco come from?
I came from here. Clifton Chenier was bringing it out all over. And he came to me one year. He told me, he says, he didn't know I wasn't recording too much of it. He shook his finger at me. He says, Soileau, you better get with that Zydeco because that's where it's at. And I remember I had turned down Dewey Balfour for about 3 times because I thought they was doing that old-time country stuff, that Cajun stuff that wouldn't sell on the boxes. And luckily he came the 3rd time, and I finally said yes, and they did La Vase de Bumble Shut, and then that exploded with that album we did on it. But anyhow, so Zydeco started with that, and Clifton was mad at his producer because he didn't put out any 45s. So the guy finally said, look, I'm going to get with you, you're going to put out some 45, I'm going to call it, what they call the label, Bayou Records. And but it was his masters. But anyhow, coming back to Toot Toot.
Okay.
The guys in New Orleans, some kind of producer over there, saw how big it was happening. He got a gal, I forget her name, to do a disco version of it. Really rumped up style, disco version. And New Orleans was playing it. So some sub-label in Atlantic in New York called them, and they said, yeah, we want to cut this thing. We want to license it. But he had offered it to the Memphis, Jackson, Mississippi label, Malico Records. And made a deal with Malico. Malico was sending them on a plane over there to go pick up the master. When they got to New Orleans, he informed them he had already made a deal. He had changed his mind. He made a deal with Atlantic. They got mad. They went back to Memphis. They cut the same sound that they had with that gal, Denise LaSalle. So you had two gals doing disco versions, two black labels fighting one another to get on black radio and to see how much could get played out of it. So we were making money on the songs. They had to pay the licenses to do the song. So it was good on us. We were making money with that. And the airplay was good as well. And then John Fogerty calls. He heard the record up at Warner Brothers in California. He said, I don't think Warner Brothers is going to pick this up. I said, probably not. But I said, I think we got a deal with Columbia. They're going to make a country star out of them because 2 country stations are playing the song. The big song was in Baton Rouge on WLAC. Not WLAC. What was that big 50,000 watt station in Baton Rouge?
What song are you talking about?
Ma Toot Toot.
They're on the country station?
Yes, they played on the country. First of all, they played it on the Cajun show that they had on Saturday mornings. And the fans would listen to it and they liked it, so they called during the day to play it. And they finally said, well, they're calling enough, we'll have to play it. So they played it in their country hours, and they got it playing, and it was so popular they keep playing it. And the 50,000 watt station in Houston found out about it, and they played it over there, and people over there liked it. So he had a country hit, and so we licensed it to CBS as a country hit. He had to get him a bus to go out and make the deal. They had to learn about 15 country songs to play the gigs. They were making $50,000 a gig to go play those night spots, and just because of Ma Toot Toot. So it was mushrooming like you wouldn't believe. John Fogerty had put it in. He came here to Crawley and had Sidney play the accordion. He hired Warren Storm to play drums and some of the area musicians to do a real big production version of it, in a sense, to put in his Showtime special that he had. And while he was playing on the Showtime special, some disc jockey in Atlanta copied it and started playing it on the air, the John Fogerty version of that he had, with that deal. And so Fogerty found out about it, and I called him, I said, Warner Brothers was about to release it. I said, no. He said, I know, I promised you I was not going to put my version out until all the other versions had tooted out, quote unquote. He said, I'm holding my word to it. They're not going to put it out. So they didn't put it out. He was able to get his country thing going and made money with that. He was on Nashville Now. We was going to get a bus in Nashville, and I called the people at CBS. I said, my man's in Nashville today. He'd be gone tomorrow. Ralph Emery had a hot show at 6:30 at night. And I said, if you can get him on that show, I'd appreciate it. She said, we'll do it. So Ralph bumped somebody that was supposed to be on that night that he could get another time. He got Sidney on. The Nashville Now band backed him up with a horn section and everything. Go to YouTube. You can probably pick it up. It's fantastic. Sidney was dancing around with his cowboy hat and his cowboy boots and his accordion. And finally got off the dan and went up to Ralph. And Ralph says, what's a toot-toot? Well, for one thing, it's a hit record, he says.
The last one, because I know you got to go, and I want to get some 45s. The Streak.
What time is it?
10:30.
It's 10:30. I'm okay. The Streak. That was Joe Evans's idea.
Joe Vance?
Joe Evans.
Okay.
He was an engineer from up there. He used to be a country musician. He's an engineer. I hired him for 2 or 3 years to run my studio. He came up to me one day and said, Floyd, he says, Ray Stevens got a #1 record in the country. He said, why don't we do one occasion version with Belton? He said, we can get your girls at the office, the secretaries, they like to sing. They were doing background singing and for Johnny's records and whatnot. He said, we can get Clint. He said, we can get him to do the background voices. And he said, we can do occasion version of it. He said, you think Belton will go for it? I said, yeah, Belton will go for it. So we called Belton. Yeah, he said, I'm going to go. So he came with his band. They laid the music tracks down. And we called the girls to come in and do the voices and whatnot. I sang with the girls, do the voices. And then the time came to do the storytelling. And Belton said, I don't know about that, guys. He said, and I was trying to tell Belton what to say and how to say it. Joe couldn't understand what the hell was going on, but he was laughing his head off in the control room. And he put the mic on and said, I know what you're saying, but he said, I tell you, it sounds funny. He said, I better leave it in. Belton says, yeah, let's leave it in. So I got the part of the announcer. I got the part of the guy that was actually telling what's going on, and I actually sang with the girls. I had 3 parts on that record. my only successful record in my career, but I can't claim credit for it. But we had a time with that. Listen, I wasn't pressing records at the time. I had to call my pressing company. I said, order another set of stampers. We're going to need to press more than 2,000 copies a day of that thing. I said, the phone calls are coming in like crazy. Cammy Doucet broke it for us in Crowley. He started playing in Crowley, had to play it all day long. And the phones kept ringing because I knew we had a mail order record store as well. And they just exploded. We sold 30,000 plus copies the first month. I sent a copy to Ray Stevens' publishing company in Atlanta. Never heard a word from it, but they got money from us off the copies we sold. But they were buying 4 and 5 copies at a time to send to friends away. Y'all have the Ray Stevens version. We got the Cajun version.